This is the Crowdcrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Brigman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project. With your host, Sal Brigman.
What up, what up? Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. If it is your first time tuning in, my name is Salvador Brigman, and on this podcast, we talk about raising money via crowdfunding. Could be on Kickstarter, could be on Indiegogo. Today's episode is more exclusively focused on nonprofit fundraising and nonprofit crowdfunding. I brought on the CEO of Razoo, Tom Matthews, and we go all into what you need to know if you are a nonprofit in the audience or you want to raise money for a charity, what you should know before hitting that launch button, how you can get donors, how you can really resonate with people on their platform, and how you can sort of construct your story. How can you get people to care about you? There are so many nonprofits nowadays. There are so many worthy causes. How do you get someone to care about your cause and what it is that you're doing in the world? This is also a great preface because I worked really hard on a book last year. I think it was probably the second quarter, maybe the third quarter of last year, 2016. And this book was pretty much all of the information that I've written, all the information I've coalesced in my mind about the topic of raising money and getting donors for a nonprofit. How do you do crowdfunding if you are a nonprofit organization? What should you know? How do you market your campaign? How do you get donors? All this kind of stuff I outlined in this book, Nonprofit Crowdfunding Explained. And if you want to check it out, just type it into Amazon, Nonprofit Crowdfunding Explained, or you can go to the website, nonprofitcrowdfundingexplained.com. Also has some free information on that site. But I sort of put you through this step-by-step process of, if you don't know anything, how do you get up to speed really quickly? And that book has been bought, been downloaded a lot of times. There's now a physical version. What I've been working on recently is something I have never done before. I always love pushing my skills, always love trying new things. I am now creating an audiobook for that book. So it's going to be a companion audio version on Audible. So if you're more of a listener, you like listening to my podcast, or you like listening to other podcasts, you don't have the time to actually buy a book and read it. I mean, books are so blasé. You can actually listen to this on Audible, but I've put a lot of effort into making sure that this is a professional audio product for you guys. Like, it's not just me rattling off the cuff like I usually do. It's really me reading the script, but in a way that sounds like it is impromptu, in a way that it's engaging. I listen to those audiobooks and some of the guys are just droning on and on about a topic. And it reminds me of those teachers you had in high school or middle school or even college that just droned on, that knew a ton about the topic. Don't get me wrong, they know a lot, but they don't know how to convey it in a great way that's engaging, in a way that's going to make you listen and perk up. I mean, I have gone to classes where I just fall asleep because the guy is just droning on and the topic's interesting, but it's oh my gosh, it's just so hard to consume. So I went to special lengths to make sure that this audiobook is engaging. I read it myself. I put all of my passion and my energy, and I bring you along the journey of how to actually launch a nonprofit crowdfunding campaign. It kind of reminds me of, if you ever watch the Olympics, you see these figure skaters doing loop-de-loops and really cool tricks, and they make it look so easy. But actually, there's a ton of preparation that goes into being able to do that. And the same thing with this audiobook. Producing an audiobook is actually a lot harder than producing a podcast. It was way more editing, way more understanding sound quality, all that kind of stuff. I think I went initially a little bit over my head, but I figured it all out for you guys. So this is going to be great. If you want to check it out, go to crowdcrux.com/nonprofitaudio. And you can join a waiting list there, and I will email you the second that the audiobook comes out so you can download it and easily consume it in that way. Without further ado, let's get to this interview with Tom Matthews, the CEO of Razoo, and learn how to get that badly needed funding that you deserve for your nonprofit or charity. Tom, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, man?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Totally. And where are you hailing in from? Where around the country are you located?
We're actually outside of Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia.
Nice. And you were saying you thought I was from DC. Yeah, I went to school there for 4 years, undergrad, George Washington. Absolutely loved it. It's a great city and also a lot cleaner than New York, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different scale than New York, obviously. I mean, there's nothing like New York, but it's a cool city. And obviously we focused a lot on nonprofits at Razoo, and it's really sort of the headquarters of so many nonprofits and sort of the heartbeat of the nonprofit community. So it's a good place for us to be. We also have a small team out in San Francisco too, so we try to be bi-coastal.
Very cool. When did you actually join the organization, as that lead CEO role?
Yeah, so I've been with the organization since May of 2015. And every day I discover how much I don't know about this industry. It's pretty amazing, actually. My background is a lot different than this crowdfunding in general, although I do have some exposure to crowdfunding as an investor.
Okay.
But also really just the nonprofit world. And that is, probably 90% of what Razoo does is help nonprofits raise money. And my background is really more sort of communication software, a little bit different, dealing with mobile operators and large carriers and that kind of thing. It's quite a different universe when you're dealing with the nonprofits.
Why then did you want to jump into that whole new world? I mean, I think nonprofits are really exciting. There's so many different things that are going on, technology, et cetera. What made you actually jump into this whole new world?
Now, I mean, it's a bit of a long story, but I was brought in by the investors, and they had asked me to sort of help them out and try to move the company and the technology specifically in a new direction, try to capture some new market opportunities. And I was interested in crowdfunding and decided, what the heck, I'll give this a try. It's very, very interesting. I actually, helped them temporarily for a short period of time, and then they asked me to take it on permanently. And after having a taste of the team here, which is a great small team, as well as just the overall, this nonprofit world and the good that you do every day and the feelings that you get coming into work are a little bit different than when, in my past life, I had to face a Verizon or an AT&T or someone like that, where you knew they were going to beat the heck out of you and squeeze every nickel out of you in order to get what they were looking for. So yeah, I really enjoy it, and I felt like it was a great business to be involved in from a business perspective, as well as obviously the good that we do.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very emotionally rewarding being able to help so many people. Can you give the listeners an idea of just how many people Razoo has helped, or the amount that has been fundraised on the platform?
Sure. So the company has raised over $500 million on the platform.
Wow.
Yeah. And as I said, we've been around for a while. We've been around since 2007 in a couple of different forms. But the overwhelming majority, 95% of that has really been raised for nonprofits. So that has been the predominant focus of the business, is helping nonprofits, mostly small to medium-sized nonprofits, raise money. And I think, we've run, and much of that is peer-to-peer fundraising, meaning it's ambassadors or advocates or someone who's passionate about helping a cause or a nonprofit running the fundraiser on their behalf and supporting the nonprofit. And then a large percentage is the nonprofits themselves, either just using our site as a place to tell their story and build their own organizational page and take donations in, or generally they use it for specific projects. So they may have a specific type of initiative that they're attempting to raise money for, and they'll use our platform for doing that.
I was going to say, I'm sure you have a wealth of information just from having helped so many different campaigns in terms of your insights, in terms of online fundraising in general, the best practices, etc. But I did just have to ask you one question here. And that is, when I first got into crowdfunding, I had this really big conception of how it worked. And I quickly started to learn very quickly a lot of different things about the industry, about how online works, etc. What is the number one thing you would say that you learned that just going in this last 2 years or so that you didn't know previously?
Wow, what a tough question to ask. But I think, my preconceived notion of crowdfunding was a little bit different than the reality of what I see. I think I kind of had an assessment that, the campaign organizers, the individuals who set up a campaign or a fundraiser, needed to do a lot of the self-promotion, but they would also get help from the internet as an audience. And what I've realized is that notion is probably skews more towards the organizer or the organization, in the case of a nonprofit, really need to market themselves. They use the platform as a vehicle, and the marketing generally comes from them. It's not so much put it up and they will come. You really have to work at it, and that I think is one of the things that we've certainly that I've learned over the course of the last year and a half or so.
And honestly, that is reality, because grants are drying up. Funding sources are really difficult for nonprofits. A cash-strapped nonprofit, they see crowdfunding, they see a platform like Razoo, and they're like, yes, free money. Like, we can raise money now finally for this nonprofit. And they sort of get there and they realize they actually need to have a plan. They need to have an outreach plan, how to get actually donors, how to boost that fundraising meter, like all that kind of stuff. That's a really big wake-up call, I think, for many nonprofits.
Yeah, it definitely is. And then the other thing, too, is even when they have a plan, just the storytelling aspect of, how you build your campaign and how you tell that story and how you compel people to get emotionally involved in participating, whether that's in, the form of donating or whether that's in the form of advocating, right, using their own influence to help bring others in. That really is dependent on the way you present yourselves in so many ways, just like in really any field. There is a presentation layer that's really important. And I think many of the nonprofits don't have the tools to do that. It's pretty critical in crowdfunding. I'm not sure if you would agree with me on that, but that's the experience that we've had. You really need to tell your story correctly, and you need to market yourself. And then you have a good chance of getting some help along the way.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, but I do have a question. So why do you think the story is so important? Someone listening to this podcast, they're just now getting their pitch together. They're just now thinking about raising money on Razoo or another platform. And they're saying, okay, this story thing, like, I know I should be focused on that, but like, what actually is that? Like, why do I need that? What does that mean for the donors?
Well, I mean, I guess there's a couple of aspects that I see in that. And one is, first of all, we're all people, right? And, I think as individuals, we all have this sort of desire that's inherent and innate in the human being to want to help, right? And obviously, unfortunately, there are some people out here who don't have that, but for the most part, that's the way humans react. And you couple the notion of how do I get this emotional message or this compelling message across that causes me to want to actually participate and help and share in some way, support in some way. You couple that with the notion of all of the noise in the marketplace, the clutter in terms of information that we have to sift through on a daily basis. And you have to be able to get that story told in an efficient way, in a compelling way, so that the reader will take the time to actually sit through 2 minutes of a short story and hopefully be compelled to provide that kind of support. And I think that's really it. There's just so much clutter in the marketplace. If you don't tell your story efficiently and if you don't tell it in a compelling way, you're not going to have the emotional reaction or the passionate reaction that causes people to step up and give or support.
It's sort of a blessing and a curse when it comes to social media and technology, because now, more than ever before, we have so many tools to be able to tell that story, to reach out to new donors, to engage people in our nonprofit. But at the same time, so does everyone else. So the question becomes, how do you stand out? And unfortunately, I think, like you said, you can't stand out with appeals to logic. Like you can't say because of these statistics or this is something that should be remedied in the world. You really have to bring people into and feel and experience the people that you're helping. And I guess you do that with your story.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. And I mean, there's just so many competing calls to action out there everywhere you turn. And obviously the crowdfunding space is a fairly crowded space as well. So, you need to be able to get as you said, bring them in, right? Bring them in. I mean, I think of this story that, one of my board members likes to tell. And, he tells a story about an individual who jumps off the platform on the subway to rescue the person that's fallen in as a train is coming. And why does he do that? Risk his life. Because for a brief moment in time, there is a veil that we all have that disconnects us from one another. That veil gets lifted and you're jumping in to save yourself. So not to be dramatic, but how do you create a story that causes someone to say, I empathize and I connect with you and we are connected in a way that, causes you to actually want to help. And so obviously you're not going to go, as far as jumping onto a train track to tell your story. But if, that whole theory of lifting the veil of disconnectedness between humans is really what you try to do. And there's obviously not a whole lot of, there's a lot of techniques, and I know you guys do a great job, Sal, at CrowdCrux, to tell, the listeners, your audience, how in fact they can do a much better job of presenting their campaign online. There's no real, I think, measured science to it, though. As well, there are certain techniques that you can use, but a lot of it really just comes down to finding that way to connect.
Comes down to communication and really figuring out how to make people engage and care. Having worked at Razoo for the last 2 to 3 years, have you seen any campaigns that have just stuck out in the forefront of your mind? Maybe that didn't necessarily raise the most money, but that did a really good job. Sort of something that the listeners can latch onto and use as an example.
Actually, there's one on our site right now that comes to mind, and there's been a handful along the way that I think people have done a great job of talking about. But there's one that is supporting Syrian refugees, and the picture, right? The story image tells the story right there, right? It's emergency relief for Aleppo families who are trying to escape the disaster that Syria has become. And if you look at the imagery that's used, to me, that's one of the most important components of your story. I mean, we all have short attention spans. We're all very visual by nature. And if you can really come up with great imagery and then tell a concise story, it really works. And this is a campaign that's on the site right now that every time I look at it, I feel like I want to give more to it because it's just so compelling.
Now, I know there's a lot to be said for the actual, hard assets of a campaign, the video, the image, any other kind of copywriting or text you include on the campaign. In terms of the actual marketing, though, of this fundraiser, what do you usually say as best practices for the users on your site? Like, what should they spend their time doing if they have a limited amount of time and a limited number of resources?
Yeah, and many of the campaigns obviously do have a limited amount of time. You've got to leverage your network, right? You have to leverage the network in a way, friends, family, anybody that you're connected with on social media. Obviously, you want to use Facebook. If you're a Twitter user, you want to use Twitter. Those are the tools that can help broadcast the message. And it's also, somewhat fundamental to any type of sales process. Those that you do have relationships with, those that are in your network, you need to ask them for a call to action. You need to ask them to either directly contribute or you need to ask them to share within their own network, right? And try to create some virality. And those are the things. There are a number of times where we hear from people who do have compelling campaigns, and they actually have compelling stories as well. And they've built their campaign in such a way that, you look at it and you say, all right, this one might have the right stuff, but they don't want to ask friends. They don't want to ask family members, or even some say, well, I don't really want to put it on Facebook because I don't want those to know that I don't want to appear to be panhandling or that I'm needy. And you just need to get over that. You need to ask for the order, if you will, right? Define the CTA, the action that you want them to take, and just ask. And, asking really does make a difference.
Do you recommend?
So I think that's got to be a key part of your marketing strategy.
Yeah, completely. And being willing to put yourself out there, that's always a little bit scary because the campaign might not, raise as much money as you thought. And you also have to ask things of people. That is always really scary to do, to put yourself out there. Do you ever have campaigners engaging in things like email marketing or putting on events to raise money? Anything like that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of times, in particular in the nonprofit world, the offline activity is very important. So you may have live events that are going on, and we've tried to build some tools in, obviously integrated with Facebook. We integrate with Periscope as well so that the users can actually have live broadcasts happening and, couple that with their online campaign and try to compel people to participate, via an online experience that connects them to the offline event, if you will, or the real world event.
That's cool.
We also have we've integrated our product. We call it Data Connect, and we've actually integrated with a tool, a company called Zapier, who you may be familiar with, but they have about 800 different applications that they integrate with, and many of them are, CRM and donor management tools, but there's also a number of automated marketing tools like Constant Contact and MailChimp and things like that. So we actually have individuals who raise money on behalf of a charity or even a personal fundraiser who use those kinds of sophisticated tools for automated marketing or email marketing by leveraging that interface that we built into our application that we think is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. I think many nonprofits are a little bit confused in terms of where crowdfunding fits into their normal fundraising activities. So do you think this is something that everyone every single year should do, like an annual giving thing via crowdfunding? Do you think this is a one-off kind of thing a nonprofit should use? How do you view incorporating crowdfunding into a traditional fundraising strategy?
Well, I mean, we think that the peer-to-peer aspect of crowdfunding, getting your advocates, right, individuals who may become passionate or who may get engaged in your cause via a variety of different sources, can benefit the most from crowdfunding. We also think that some of the events, there's a couple of different types of events that we support for nonprofits that leverage crowdfunding in a unique way. We have a product that we refer to as our giving event or giving day product. And these are typically events where a community foundation may bring together a group of nonprofits that they work with within their region, within their scope of their community, if you will, and bring anywhere from a couple hundred to a couple of thousand nonprofits together to leverage PR, to leverage marketing, those kinds of events that happen for short durations. I think crowdfunding can be really, really effective. And then you're starting to see national movements towards things like Giving Tuesday. And like last year, we helped raise $5 million on Giving Tuesday for nonprofits who generally may use their own website as their primary or other offline vehicles as their primary source of driving donations, but they'll use kind of leverage the benefit of the marketing and buzz that's been created around a specific event, like a Giving Tuesday or a Giving Day, if you will, put on by their community foundation.
Yeah,
those are some of the great ways to do it.
Congratulations, too. Those are good numbers for Giving Tuesday. Seems like you're helping lots of nonprofits. And I think, too, the whole thing here is the relationship that nonprofits have with their donor base. And by having people engaged either with a P2P kind of fundraising campaign or even just having them engaged with a crowdfunding campaign, it really strengthens those bonds so that further down the road, you can continue to engage that donor and be like, oh, do you remember when we raised all of this money for this event? Well, now we're doing a new thing. Wasn't that event great? Like, it really is starting a relationship there, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, the bond, as you I think described the relationship with the donors, it's very tight between a nonprofit and the donors. And the nonprofits are very protective of their donor base as well. So I think to some degree they can be skeptical of crowdfunding, yet they all realize that, the donor base that's out there today, I think, we've proven this with personal crowdfunding being as popular as it is, that the designation of the IRS designation as to whether or not you're an official charity, i.e. a nonprofit type cause, or whether you're a worthy cause that may not fall into the category of a true charitable event or a true charitable kind of cause, it's muddy in the minds of the donors. So, the nonprofits that don't dabble, at least in crowdfunding, I think they run the risk of potentially, missing out and not making the connections with a new base of donors. And in particular, a new generation of donors who are much more comfortable. The millennial generation is much more comfortable, obviously, giving online. They trust peers more as references. They're very generous, but they don't have a lot to give, so they give across a number of campaigns. They give across a number of different types of causes, but it may be smaller dollar amounts. So finding a way to cultivate, more donors and bring in new donors, I think is very critical to them. And one thing that we do for the nonprofits too is, we've got some great tools like our donation widget or donation buttons, right? Like, I think we were the first company to enable a ability to have a donation processing widget inline on a Medium, for example, right? So if you go to a Medium blog, you can actually process a donation via a Medium article without ever leaving the Medium website. And they can do the same thing on their own website, or they can use that on Facebook as well. So, we're trying to ease that transition and make it more comfortable for them to use a third-party platform such as Razoo, while maintaining that relationship as best as possible directly with their donors.
Mm-hmm. I think we've been seeing a lot of hype about the millennials and really how this whole new demographic just interacts with nonprofits in a very different way. Like, historically, you might be able to even do like TV ads, or you might be able to send out letters, physical letters. I haven't gotten a physical letter in a really long time, but I get all of my news from Facebook, Twitter, podcasts, like all these different social sources, and I am in that millennial demographic. Do you have any other advice for nonprofits that are looking to engage with millennials? I'm sure you have a lot of stats from your platform, et cetera. What should they be doing? Should they be posting photos on Facebook? Should they be posting videos? What would you recommend for them?
No, I mean, I think all of those things. One thing, and I'm just going to be sarcastic for a second. One thing I would recommend is they stop asking for addresses. Most of the nonprofits still want an address when they're asking a donor to go through the checkout process or the donation flow in the end. And obviously,
I live in the cloud. Yeah.
Yeah, you live in the cloud, and 57% of our donors today, which probably skew to an older demographic still because of the nonprofit nature that we're in, are donating via mobile devices. Yeah. So the last thing you want to be doing is, having to enter information like that. So trust that your donors are going to, they're going to be loyal to you if they're finding gratification in what you do. And the other thing I would say too is, this is true of all demographics, I believe, but it's definitely true of the millennials. And there's a number of statistics that prove this out. You want to know if you're going to make a contribution, you prefer to do it directly as much as possible. You're not necessarily loyal to the organization. You're more loyal to the cause. And the organization needs to communicate back to you about the impact that you've made. So use social media to talk about the results, right? Use social media to communicate, how effective their campaign or their efforts were to assist with the cause that they're focused on, so that the donors know that their contribution has really made a direct impact. And I think that's really important. And it's one of the great opportunities for them with social media to get that message out very effectively. And if they fail to do it, then you lose interest. You move on to somebody else because you want the direct feedback. You want to know that you're making an impact.
That's so true. And I'm an economics major. And I mean, I say that just to preface what I'm about to say because it's sometimes controversial. But I think, honestly, people give money in a transaction format because they want good emotions. They want good vibes. They want to feel like they're making a difference, that their life matters, that they have significance, that they're causing positive changes in the world. And there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, there's self-interest there, but you can only enable someone to feel that way if you allow them to, by sharing those types of stats, by sharing those updates with them. Otherwise, it's sort of like a one-way transaction. You're not letting them feel amazing. You're not enabling to feel so generous for having done this.
Oh, I mean, you are so right on that. If you think about it, right, if it's a transaction, if you view it as a transaction, I've marketed to this individual and I got Salvador to basically make a donation. That's a transaction. What you have to do is you have to take it from transactional to relational, right? And you have to have that feedback loop. You have to say, you have to express gratitude, and then you have to go beyond that and say, not only are we grateful for what you did, but look at the impact that's been made by the donation that you and others like you have made. And you change it from a transactional basis to a relational basis. And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. It also just adds way more to your own brand as people get to know you. They get a feeling for your nonprofit. One question I did have for you is, I've seen lots of crowdfunding campaigns sort of put themselves out there in terms of the founders or the actual people behind the organization, the faces. Do you think that that's necessary? Is that something that nonprofits should be doing, or should they just focus like 100% on the cause?
That's a tricky question, because I think that there's two sort of aspects to that. One, I think people really want to identify with the cause, and I think that's the emotional draw. Tell the story about the cause. What is it that we're trying to impact? But there's also a healthy dose of skepticism out there, and in particular coming from the crowdfunding community, because we've all seen a lot of fraud that's happened in crowdfunding. And I think there's a healthy level of skepticism. So you do want to know who's actually behind the campaign. I'm always shocked. I mean, one of the things that we try to encourage with our personal fundraising campaign is transparency. We want the organizer to put their face up there. We want the organizer to tell their story. We want them to share their social media links, right? So if I'm a donor, I can actually investigate you to some level of degree and, say, I feel good about this. I think, this is legit. This guy's legit. He's going to do the right thing. The same actually can hold true for a nonprofit. I don't think you have to overemphasize, the founders, but I think transparency in that regard is a pretty darn good thing.
Very cool. And one of the reasons you also came on this podcast, thank you so much for coming on, sharing all these great information, advice, tips, all this kind of stuff, is your new functionality. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that. For personal fundraisers and charity, can you tell the listeners a bit about this new program that you've basically opened up?
Sure. Thanks for that opportunity. Razoo's been around for a while, mostly, as I said earlier, focused on nonprofits, and we've helped nonprofits raise a heck of a lot of money over time, and we continue to really have our roots in the nonprofit world. But we are seeing this transition, and as I mentioned earlier, donors don't always discern the difference between a charitable cause that is a nonprofit or a tax-deductible IRS sanctioned type cause versus a personal cause for a family or for somebody in need, or an organization that's in need as well. So we've launched, we moved beyond, late last year, we moved beyond the strictly nonprofit business to open our platform up to personal crowdfunding as well. So individuals who are trying to raise money for any cause can do so. We'll allow you to raise money for yourself, a campaign for yourself, for whatever your issue or cause may be. We also have some tools that we built in that we think are pretty cool. We'll let you set up a campaign on behalf of somebody else, an organization, or an individual or a family, and invite them to actually withdraw the money themselves. The other thing that we do that we know is completely unique in the marketplace is we provide some incentive and or opportunity, if you will, for the individual who organizes a personal fundraiser to be compensated for their time and efforts. And as you may know from many of the different types of crowdfunding platforms out there in the gaming world, the Patreon type world, it's quite common for the community to contribute back to the organizer or a creator of a project or a creative type of endeavor. And so if I'm spending time and money, if I'm hosting an offline party or event to try to drive a fundraising endeavor on the Razoo platform, we give you the ability to ask the donors to provide a small gratuity or a tip to the organizer directly.
That's cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so the organizer can take those tips, or literally with a slider bar, they can give it all back directly to the organization or to the cause, or to split it or take it themselves to offset their own costs and time invested in helping do the good that they've just done by running that fundraiser. Mm-hmm. So we think that's pretty cool. We built some interesting features. Mobile first is the focus, and it's hard to differentiate yourself in the crowdfunding space, but we think that we've got a very comprehensive and extremely flexible set of offerings. We're flexible on our pricing model as well. So as you know, GoFundMe is going to charge their 5%. There are those that go out and preach that we're free, but they're not really free.
Yeah, they're not actually.
because they automatically append a 10% tip, like you carrying the market themselves as free and altruistic, but realistically, they make it very difficult for the user to opt out of the tips program. So we actually give the organizer the ability to decide, do I want to run this free and ask the donors to contribute to the platform? One way or another, we're all businesses that have overhead and expenses, and we need to keep the lights on, mm-hmm. or we go out of business. So, we'll offer a straight up fee program. We'll offer tips. We have flexibility in terms of the way you can set up a campaign to ask the donors to cover the fees on behalf of an organization or on behalf of a fundraiser's efforts, or not. It's really up to you. So we give you that kind of flexibility, which we definitely think is differentiated and unique. And going back to the theme of transparency, look, there are these different business models. They all try to get to the same thing, though, right? They all try to essentially keep the business, going and growing. And that's our goal as well. And we want the organizer to pick the approach and the business model that works best for them.
Very, very true. I think that really does stand out, being way more transparent. You're basically just giving them the option to decide. And you're not pulling any tricks or anything like that. You're not marketing it in some way that it's not actually is. You're just giving them the tools. And what I also like about your platform is you guys seem to have more of a personal outreach type of approach. I mean, you literally just emailed me. That's how we started this conversation. It seems like you're going sort of head and shoulders beyond to try to help nonprofits and really establish that relationship before they even decide, am I going to use Razoo, GoFundMe, Give Forward, all these different platforms out there. So I really like that about you guys too.
Yeah, well, thanks for recognizing that. We think that's kind of the grassroots way that you have to build a business. So, that's awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Tom, for coming on the podcast, sharing some of this great advice. I urge people to go and check out Razoo. Be sure to link that up in the show notes, and also to check out some of your new features. I want to give you the last word here. If you could share a word of encouragement, a word of advice, anything that you would like to pass on to the nonprofits in the audience who are just now getting started with their crowdfunding efforts.
Thanks. First of all, thanks for having me on as well, and thanks for doing the work that you do. Your blog is great. I know a lot of people who read it, and your podcasts and your YouTube channel, and it's very helpful, I think, to have some tools out there that educate the individual, because it can be daunting. As far as encouragement for nonprofits, I would just say lean into it. Try. If it's concerning to you, if you're not sure how to do it, just lean in, give it a shot. We have some great people in our community team who are willing to sort of help you, take you by the hand, help you tell your story. We've got some automated tools that will help you tell the story as well. And just give it a go. You've got nothing to lose.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it's also the more that you put yourself out there, generally, the better you have better results. Like just putting yourself out there, you learn so much. Like you also just jumping into a whole new role, into a whole new industry, you learned a ton. That also happens when you jump into the online fundraising game. You're going to learn a lot. It's going to be a great ROI in the future for your organization. And you also just grow as a person, which we all want to do. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Tom. We got to do a follow-up interview because this could have been like hours long because I'm really interested about this topic. But thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Brigman, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast and you got something out of my conversation with the founder of Razoo. I think we got a lot of great information here about your story, about your strategy for raising money, and also what you should focus on. There's a lot of information out there. I have a lot of podcasts on iTunes. I think like over 150, lots of blog posts I've written, YouTube videos, etc. There's so much information. It's very easy to get overwhelmed, like just being honest here. And I think that this conversation for me it sort of just helps you figure out what to narrow your focus on. If you want to go more in depth, if you want more information about how to really smash your fundraising goal, how to raise money, how to get donors, how to market your campaign and tell your story, you can check out my new Audible book, which is going to be coming out at the end of this month, I believe. You can access that at crowdcrux.com/nonprofit audio. That is crowdcrux.com/nonprofit audio. And I'll let you know the second that book comes out. I'll also probably share one or two free resources or free videos on that email list. I'm very generous with my content, as you can tell. So I like to share things and sort of help people along the path. Obviously, I also do have paid products, but that's sort of my philosophy towards life and business. Thank you for joining me on this episode, spending a little bit of time here with me today. I will see you next time.